You're listening to ChainLeak, the crypto news podcast with your host, Joshua Roomsberg. Follow and subscribe today.
Welcome to the ChainLeak podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Roomsberg. Today's episode is sponsored by the Flare Foundation. Today's guest, the founder and CEO of Flare, Hugo. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right. So first off, give the listeners a breakdown of what is Flare and how you are looking to transform the industry with this new protocol.
Absolutely. So blockchains generally are bad at understanding anything that has happened external to that blockchain. They are ledgers for processing transactions that happen on that chain. They don't traditionally have native and strong protocols for understanding other blockchains or for understanding other types of system. So, for instance, internet-based APIs. So Flare is a smart contract chain. It's a layer one, meaning it's sort of equivalent to, Ethereum, XRP, those, in that layer. Smart contracts uses the Ethereum virtual machine. It has two really important protocols. The first is the FTSO, which is a protocol for the Flare time series oracle, a protocol for time series data, meaning data that moves over time. So in this case, crypto prices is what's happening on the network currently, but it could be many other different types of price, or it could be other types of time series data, like weather in Milwaukee, over time. Or it could be an index, anything that anyone needs.
Are outside entities able to access that data?
What do you mean by an outside entity?
So a weather station, are they able to tap into that weather data on chain?
So absolutely. If they had an open API, a weather station wouldn't necessarily tap into it, but our data providers could go and grab the data from that API and bring it onto Flare. And so that's the first protocol. Provides prices secured by essentially the token of the network, secured by delegation of that token. So at the moment, the system has about 80 data providers. So that makes it quite decentralized. And it has a large amount of tokens being delegated to it. And we want to see more tokens being delegated to it. We want to see more people securing that system. So this provides prices.
Is Flare the first main chain that acts as an Oracle network?
It's absolutely the first main layer one that acts as a data provider network.
Because I was just thinking about that. I know of a few other projects that are building on top of other chains. ChainLeak comes to mind. Go plugin on top of XDC network. But you're saying that Flare is an Oracle network in itself, and they're the first main chain?
The core aspect is how you secure that Oracle.
Okay.
The key difference between us and other oracles is that our Oracle is secured at the blockchain layer with the main token of the blockchain. And that is a totally different way of securing an Oracle. And in our view, and I think it's fairly obvious, a substantially more secure way of securing an Oracle. So the FTSO, the pricing has been really very accurate. It is designed to be able to withstand a very large amount of malfeasance amongst the participants. So essentially, it would take a huge amount of corruption in the Oracle for the Oracle's price to become degraded.
That data to be corrupted?
Exactly, because it's all secured by the token. So it's the same idea as how much corruption a network would need, how many corrupt participants a network would need in order to become corrupt. So it's like the idea of a 51% attack. Whereas these ideas are not inherent in any other oracles. There is often trusted, or if they're using their own token on a blockchain, it's very, very much harder to get that level of decentralization. It's very hard to be able to get so many participants. Most smart contract platforms could not handle the number of participants we have and the amount of data we have. So that's incredibly important.
That comes back to the transactions per second. Do you know the maximum amount of transactions per second or the standard?
So it both is and it isn't. It both does and it doesn't come down to the transactions per second, because it also comes down to where in the layer of the network you put it. So, for instance, the Ethereum virtual machine is constrained by things like memory. This gives it, you can run it as you can technically run the Ethereum virtual machine substantially faster than is being run, on Ethereum. And we do run the Ethereum virtual machine substantially faster. It takes up more memory, but there are other parts of the blockchain, so the base blockchain layers, where you can get more scalability. So outside of the virtual machine, you can get more scalability, but you're still using the blockchain to secure it. So anyway, I think if you wouldn't mind, I'll just finish off what Flare is. So that's the first protocol, the FTSO. So prices and time series data onto the network, high quality. We hope eventually institutional grade quality, and then what we call the state connector. The state connector is a really interesting protocol. It is designed to allow the network to come to consensus over what has happened. So we have time series data, and then we have deterministic data. So something that essentially once observed doesn't change. So to give you an example of that, a transaction on a blockchain. So the state connector is designed to allow Flare to get deterministic data onto it from other blockchains, and in a slightly different setting, which we call the web connector, from the internet. So from internet APIs. Like, for instance, if you put a tweet up, we may be able to call the Twitter API to determine, have you put a tweet up? What is your handle?
What time?
What time? What was the contents? What hashtag did it have? So the idea being is to create a blockchain for data, for prices, for blockchain data, for as much internet data as we can get. And then to figure out how to expand the set of data. The reason we think that's important for the industry is that at the moment there are broadly, three key use cases. Payments, principally using stablecoins like USDC and USDT. DeFi, principally being the lending and borrowing and exchanging of tokens, and then NFTs. And this is a great start for the industry, but it is not necessarily how the industry
end game.
It's a very small area of what we think can be done with, essentially, if you can bring as much data on chain as possible in as secure a way as possible, in as easy way as possible, then we think that actually there's a massive proliferation of use cases for blockchain that can happen. Now, we're starting with blockchain interoperability, bridging, relay, messaging, being able to make a payment on one chain that does something on another, being able to make a payment on one chain that does something on Flare. So, for instance, with the state connector, great, example use case. Make a payment on the Bitcoin blockchain, make a payment on the XRP blockchain, triggers a smart contract to deliver you an NFT on Flare. Nice use case, like easy to understand use case. And then there's things like token bridging, both for non-smart contract tokens and smart contract based tokens through potentially different protocols. And then, relay between blockchains, both of data, but also, message calling. So allowing essentially an action on one chain to then call an action on another chain.
Have you heard of or seen any developments on that type of technology to where if a user handles a transaction on Ethereum and you said it distributes on Flare, it could distribute an NFT on Flare.
Absolutely.
Do you see the potential for that in the future?
So I think for a transaction on Ethereum, it's less interesting because you could just buy an NFT on Ethereum. I think if you're
But it
holding,
wouldn't have the speed of transactions on Flare, right? Or the
it,
cost.
it would not. But I'm not necessarily sure that someone buying on Ethereum, would necessarily care. I think it's more applicable for people holding tokens from chains that don't have smart contracts. If there's an
Okay.
Ethereum use case, of course, absolutely, I'd be delighted to, help people build that use case, help people understand how to use Flare in order to build that use case. But
Because me personally, I don't like using the Ethereum blockchain. When we were at the last top, transactions were over $100-$300 a transaction, and that sounds unusable to an
agreed.
end user
But
experience.
if you're going to
So
make
for
a transaction on Ethereum, you'd have to you'd still have to pay a fee. It would be a lower fee because you're not using a contract. It would just be a 21K gas transaction.
yeah,
But yeah, I think it could reduce the cost of buying an NFT with Ethereum. Whether
do
that,
you not personally see NFTs being a big aspect of the Flare network?
oh, I absolutely do. I think NFTs are going to be one of the largest use cases of blockchain. I'm just, I
In
think
general?
I do, but I think they're going to represent an endless number of things. I don't think it's just going to be art.
Yep. I agree with you there. Um, once again, I don't think we ever got to it. Do you have a specific transactions per second that the network can handle?
So that's kind of up to the network settings.
Okay.
So with the Ethereum virtual machine, you can and a fast blockchain. So at its core, the network can handle about 6,000 transactions per second. As soon as you put the
Okay.
Ethereum virtual machine on, you have to choose a gas limit. And really the gas limit you want has to be the trade-off is essentially how much memory, how much storage the nodes have, because that storage increases very dramatically. So on Songbird, I think we're doing about Songbird, the Canary Net can
Yep.
handle about I think it's about 1,000 TPS.
Okay. And then is the cost per transaction smaller compared to, say, Ethereum or Bitcoin?
Very substantially.
Okay. Could you go a little more into depth on that?
It's more in the realm of I mean, I think it's in the realm of sort of XRP like cost.
Okay.
Maybe it's one decimal place higher, but it's not. It's extremely low.
Is that a direct correlation between the chain itself or the energy consumption?
So we have no meaningful energy consumption in, say, the same idea as proof of work. We're not a proof of work chain.
Okay. Now, to the Flare ecosystem, the FLR token, are you able to stake Flare at this time?
Absolutely. So we don't call it staking; we call it
Okay.
delegation. And
Okay.
you delegate your token to a Flare time series Oracle provider. That is how the system functions and how essentially the system comes to a single price from many prices input by different providers.
Is that happening directly on the Flare network, or is that
Absolutely.
happening wrapped on Ethereum?
No, it's happening directly on the Flat network.
Okay, what was the thing where you had to wrap tokens for Ethereum?
No, there's no.
No,
There's a
there's
thing called
nothing.
wrap. So there's a thing called wrapped flare, and the reason why there's a thing called wrapped flare is because the Ethereum virtual machine doesn't know how to do mathematical operations on the native token. So you have to, or essentially, you have to convert it into ERC20, but
Yeah.
not on Ethereum, but an ERC20, a wrapped version of the token on Flare.
It stays on Flare.
Stays on
Okay.
Flare, but it's using the ERC20 standard that then allows a smart contract to do mathematical operations on it.
That was the part that was confusing me, because you recently announced a proposal, the FIP01, and in that you have to wrap tokens to be able to vote. That was the part I didn't
No,
understand
it's
personally.
nothing to do with Ethereum.
Okay. So how does that work with wrapping your tokens to potentially vote on this new proposal?
When you say how does it work, there's a number of ways to
The
wrap.
wrapping of the tokens
Yeah.
themselves, they
So
stay
essentially,
on the Flare network?
yeah, it's so essentially you take your Flare, you send
Yep.
it to a contract on the Flare network called the
Okay.
wrapped Flare contract, and it immediately sends you
So
back wrapped Flare.
with the proposal, could you give us a breakdown of how you are trying to transition the remaining distribution of Flare tokens from the original snapshot?
Absolutely. So essentially, we have this pool of tokens which are going to the public. 15% of those have already gone out. They have gone to people that partook in the original snapshot in 2020 of the XRP ledger.
Okay.
Now, we have put forward a proposal called FIPO1. Originally, there would have been 36 distributions to that same pool of people.
Yep.
But what we've been working on for a long time with FIPO1 is, if the network has changed dramatically, which it has since that original snapshot. So at the time of that original snapshot, the network was designed only to be a smart contract layer that referenced the XRP ledger.
Okay.
So having essentially distributed the token to people from XRP, it was then designed to be only allied to XRP. In the last 2 years, we've completely redesigned the network.
Yep.
Such that it is no longer does no longer serve one network, but is itself its own network that can serve all of the networks. So not just XRP, but Bitcoin and Litecoin and Dogecoin
So instead of
and
being
Cosmos.
locked into that one network, you've seen the potential for the whole industry.
So essentially, because I'm sure one of the questions everyone asks is, why did it take us so long to get from the snapshot to here? And that's because we completely rebuilt and redesigned all of the protocols from the ground up.
Okay.
And the reason we did that was to make them extensible beyond one network to many. And so that's like essentially the state connector was completely redesigned and required an extensive re-engineering process to make it essentially able to connect to every network. And so what Flare is today is a network that is designed not only to provide a service to the XRP ledger, but to provide essentially interoperability where possible for all blockchains. And not just blockchains, but with the internet. So with FIPO1, what we're trying to do is actually make that then work, because there is no possibility that interoperability for non-XRP blockchains, that anyone would play with that if there's a set of people receiving tokens for the next 36 months that they have no chance of joining. Essentially, the expanded vision would be dead in the water, completely dead in the water.
Because it would basically be exclusive to XRP at that point.
Exactly. So imagine if you were a developer who wanted to build something between Flare and Cosmos.
Yep.
But yet you've then got this separate group of people who are continuing to receive tokens over here. So therefore, essentially, the existing structure of the distribution just didn't work at all for the concept of having a broadly interoperable chain. It only worked if we were going to be interoperable only with XRP.
Now that's another question I had for you is why did you choose the XRP ledger instead of a variety of other blockchains that were out at that time?
So at the time, there were far fewer smart contract networks.
Okay.
It
So
wasn't
this
it wasn't necessarily viable that there would be competitors to Ethereum.
okay.
Um, the to us the utility in serving multiple networks, especially the smart contract networks, the newest smart contract networks, being able to tie up between XRP, Bitcoin, and the smart contract networks, and Ethereum L2s. Like
Right.
this is where the utility is. It's in acting as the bridge between all of these different things, um, and acting as the place for data from the internet to come to. So we chose XRP because it was sorely needing smart contract capabilities and still does, as does, in my view, Bitcoin.
Yep.
But we think the opportunity to actually take the protocols that we were thinking of delivering a much, much more powerful set of protocols that can be applied to every blockchain, we think that's very good. So what FIPO1 is trying to do is the following. It's trying to preserve the spirit of the distribution by allowing anyone that has a token to wrap their token and then receive a pro rata proportion of the 36 months airdrops. So if you are 100% of what's wrapped, you receive 100% of the airdrops. If you are
Okay.
50% of what's wrapped, you receive 50% of the total airdrops. So what this does is, as the only people to have received the token without having purchased it on an exchange are the XRP community, what the intention of the proposal does is it puts them in the driving seat as to whether they wish to remain with the network and whether they wish to stake and get their pro rata full allocation, or whether they wish to pass that right on to someone else.
Would they receive the same amount they were projected to receive
So
originally if they take their tokens and wrap what they received?
depends what they do, and it depends what unfolds in the network. Um,
Okay.
there will definitely be like dilution to the total amount of tokens because of the inflation rate. But it depends how much someone receives, entirely depends on how much they are wrapping and how much in total is wrapped. So
Okay.
essentially, if there's only one token wrapped, that one token will receive all of the remaining distribution.
For that 1 month specifically or
If there's
all
only if there's
36
only
months?
one token wrapped ever,
Yep.
that singular token and the account associated with it will receive 24 billion tokens, or however many it is.
I guess my question was, say this month there are 70% of the tokens are wrapped in delegated, and there's 30% that are not wrapped at this time. And then next month, an extra 10% get wrapped. Is there a difference in the amount of tokens a user would receive?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
it's pro rata per month. So if you are 50% of the total amount per month, you would receive 50% of that month's distribution.
Okay. So every month it changes for the next 36 months?
It's the distribution is done monthly, and so it's
Okay.
calculated monthly.
Now, is there a reason specifically you chose to do a 36-month distribution instead of a one-time event?
Yeah, singular airdrops to people who haven't done, say, work. Let's call it work. If you look at, say,
Yep.
like a singular airdrop that was successful, Uniswap, but they distributed the token to people that had used Uniswap. and have
Right.
been power users of Uniswap. We have no information on the XRP holders from the snapshot. We don't know, if they are going to be particularly, massive
Using the
users of
network.
Flare. And so,
Yep.
what we don't want, and it's very important that people understand that.
Okay.
Lastly, we wanted to have this option for essentially what FIPO1 does is it gives this option for people to essentially increase their position if they want to. It also gives an option for new parties to come into the network and be active participants
Play
and
a role in the ecosystem.
and earn that reward from wrapping their tokens. And we think that's really important in the growth of the network. And we think that this creates a substantially more useful ecosystem with more applications over the long term than the existing version of the distribution.
So at this point, how do you feel personally about the FIP01 proposal that you have placed onto the network? Do you feel positive about it? Do you feel XRP holders are getting left out? Do you feel this is a way for you to figure out who wants to use the ecosystem?
So I think I'm very happy with how it's gone.
Okay.
So far, there's been about 1 billion votes, slightly more than 1 billion votes, um,
All right.
of which 90, of which of, I asked our team not to vote, but not everyone saw the message in Slack. And
Okay.
so a few of them voted. 74 million have 73 million of the tokens that have voted for it are from our team. But stripping that out, it's still 95-5.
Okay.
You know,
So the proposal looks like it's going to pass.
it's not just going to pass, it appears to be going to pass with massively emphatic support.
Okay. Now, do you feel the support is for users outside of the network that have entered, new users, or do you think people within the XRP community have wrapped and delegated their assets themselves?
Oh, I think many of people have within the XRP community have wrapped and delegated. We see, people talking about that on Twitter. But if it's new users, that's also awesome. That's the whole point of FIPO1, which is to get more people
Yeah,
into the network. The XRP community have the whip hand. They don't have to. They got their tokens. They can stay with the
they
network.
can wrap them.
They
Yeah,
can wrap it. If it's attracting new people to the community, bloody awesome.
that's even better in a sense.
Yeah.
Now, another aspect of developments on top of the Flare network have been the potential for F assets. Could you explain what an F asset is?
Sure. So F Assets was conceptual paper we put out that describes a protocol about how you would get assets from a non-smart contract network like XRP and Bitcoin, and Litecoin, Dogecoin onto
Yep.
Flare. So
Okay.
F asset is essentially a representation of an asset that comes from a non-smart contract network on
Moved
Flare,
on to.
moved onto Flare in a secure and trustless manner. These are really important concepts, right? Because at the moment, the only way to get one of those assets onto a network is to use something that is either insecure or trusted. And so, or maybe insecure and trusted, which is even worse. But to put a short story on it, I really think that the models for moving these kind of assets to other chains are very poor and have historically been very poor.
Is this the same concept as a cross-chain bridge, or is it a different type of concept?
So it is a cross-chain bridge, but it's a completely different way of doing it.
Okay.
So it's essentially a party called an agent would put some collateral up on Flare.
All right.
Let's just think about what that collateral might be. It might be Flare, it might be a combination of Flare and a combination of stable tokens. So
Okay.
you have a collateral. Let's call that like $300.
Yep.
And then someone with, say, $100 of Bitcoin or XRP. They could send that $100 to this agent's account on the underlying chain, let's say on XRP.
Yep.
They send their $100, and this agent can only be responsible for $100. He's got $300 of collateral, and $100 can be sent to him, maximum.
Okay.
So essentially, what that person is doing is they're sending $100 to the agent, and the system, Flare, and its state connector observes that happening, and issues what we call FXRP or F Bitcoin or F Dogecoin or F Litecoin to that user. So
is it always double or triple the amount that you're trying to transact between chains?
When you say double or triple, you meaning the collateral?
You said the guy would have $300 to move $100 worth of XRP.
Yeah,
onto the
that's an example. Where it comes down to in the collateral base is that's a flexible parameter, and I'm not certain yet.
Okay.
It's also a question of what is the composition of that collateral. How much of it is a token, how much of it is, say,
Stable coins.
a stable coin. These are flexible parameters, and these are things that can be changed over time. But anyway, that's a conceptual system, and it's a very, very good use case for Flare. It's one of the most interesting use cases of Flare.
Okay. Now, over the next 6 months to a year, what are the biggest developments you would like to see with the Flare network?
So one of the most exciting things, I think, is a protocol that someone has come to me with, which is cross-chain relay secured by Flare. So relaying things like the FTSO prices to other blockchains, and rewarding the FTSOs and potentially their delegators for that, but also potentially relaying data between chains. So ETH to, say, Solana, but secured by Flare. Why is that a possible model? The reason why it's a possible model is because Flare can observe both ETH and Solana. It has the state connector. It has the ability to see what has happened on both of those networks. And so if a relay system was staked on Flare, if a relay node becomes malicious, they can have their stake slashed.
All right.
On Flare automatically as soon as someone proves that they've been malicious. So it's a really nice model.
Does that remove them permanently, or does it just slash them for a period of time?
Entirely, at the person's discretion, at the developer's discretion. It's not something we're building. So, that to me is very interesting. Then, lots of things like there's a sort of move towards having on-chain insurance in blockchain.
Yep.
So one of the things the insurance industry really needs is an ability to reduce its exposure to a single risk. This is called diversification, right? So imagine you run an insurance company and you only insured one airline, right? And imagine that airline had a problem, right? And you would have zero diversification. On-chain insurance protocols currently have zero diversification because they're insuring, or very poor diversification because they're insuring protocols on a single chain which are part of a single ecosystem which can be systemically affected.
Manipulated, right.
whatever happens, whether it's a code bug or a manipulation or whatever. But
Yeah.
what is really interesting about what we can do with Flare, what we can offer to people building those kind of applications, is that you could build insurance on Flare, on-chain insurance that can pay out on Flare, but pay out essentially the risk can come from multiple ecosystems because Flare is able to essentially observe what has happened across multiple chains. So you could have an insurance pool that is insuring across 5 different chains simultaneously, diversifying the risk.
Okay. That sounds pretty crazy. Is that already in development?
It's an idea I've been discussing with an insurance developer.
Okay.
Not necessarily in development. I think very, very early days, but certainly
It's
something.
a concept. It's a concept at this
Well, I
point.
mean, they already have an application on another chain. It's certainly what they're interested in using Flare for. So,
Okay.
the thing that I think is exciting, but also a challenge, is we have to educate developers essentially about this new paradigm of what's available now because
And
of
how
Flare.
to build it out.
Well, also they have to change their. In a way, we have to educate them so they can change their thinking. So they no longer think, oh, I need to build a product on one chain to do this thing. It's how do I build a substantially better product that can do stuff across multiple chains at the same time? And that's a much more interesting,
Concept.
more interesting utility. But it's also not immediately accessible to most developers who are essentially cognizant of the existing model and are unaware of the capabilities of something like Flare.
Well, I appreciate you being on the show today. I look forward to the future developments of the Flare network. I hope to have you on the show again.
That'd be cool.
This is Hugo, the founder and CEO of Flare Network. Thank you for being here, brother.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Have a good one.